When covering big breaking news stories, it can be a true challenge. And I want to welcome you into my world to explain things about how I understand newsrooms, working in a handful of them in my time as a journalist for the better part of 2 decades. My name's Annette Lawless, by the way. And if you haven't met me, hello. I record a lot of videos in my vehicle, so bear with me. The sound and the video just looks a lot better than some other settings, so I roll with it. But we have this big story this week of in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, a school shooter. So the shooting actually took place at a mass at a Catholic school in Minneapolis, a true tragedy. As of the day when it happened, it was Wednesday. A couple of kids had died, ages 8 and 10. The suspected shooter in that case took their own life. There's just a lot of information that we as media were navigating through. And I think the one thing that I want to be known, if you ever watch media, and I hope that a lot of other journalists follow this too, it's just at least a mentality that I think is so important. It's much better to not be first, but be the most accurate, be first at having those facts. And I say that because it's so easy in a situation like this to get bad information. For example, a good rule of thumb that I've adopted in my time as a journalist is that I do not report scanner traffic. Different people will listen to police scanners and they share stuff online. There's social media pages that do that. And I think it's great that those exist because we all have an interest in our communities and people do have a curiosity. This is not to knock those people. But as a journalist, I can't go and say, oh, I heard this on the scanner and blah, blah, blah. It just wouldn't be fair because some of that firsthand information shared with a dispatcher may not be the most accurate information. Plus, sometimes they have training and different things that might muddy up what's really happening in the community versus what they're working on maybe behind the scenes. What we do as journalists, and I do believe those scanner pages do this as well, some of them, contact law enforcement. So you can call the dispatchers and say, hey, what can you verify with this? And they're usually so forthcoming and great with working with us on those details. I feel like that relationship over the years has been pretty good. They can only give us certainly very basic information because they too understand like they don't have the 100% most full circle information about what happened, but they'll tell us, when they got the calls, what I'll ask, what's the triage? So how bad are, do you have any injuries or people taken to the hospital? They usually can tell you how severe that injury is, at least upon initial look. And initially it could be higher or lower than what it actually is. Typically, I find some like law enforcement might call something, a little bit more severe than maybe what it truly is. But you got to think about internal injuries and stuff like that. And it's not to knock them. It's just they're doing their job and they're trying to get that person to the hospital. And then we're hopefully going to get information from, investigator or someone down the road. So those are things that we have to navigate. So, going and sharing that information first is tough. My perspective on this has changed through the years. I was definitely, when I was younger as a journalist, probably wanted that information first and be like, I'm going to share it first, but my thought in the process and speaking to families and law enforcement through the years is that you just really need to be thoughtful and intentional with what you're doing and, relaying to the community safety information, but maybe just being careful about not skewing it any certain way. You just want to be really mindful of everybody. These are families and people who have lives. And, as a journalist, I'm there to relay some of that information. But, in the end, that's not my life. And I don't want to go and make it complicated for someone else. I just want to report the facts and be fair. And I think that is important. A person had pointed out online after I put a news report out this week about the school shooting situation, the shooter at the mass in Minnesota at that Catholic school, and that took place on Wednesday morning. And someone had said, by the evening, I put a news report at my TV station, and they're like, oh, there's more information out there. And I'm like, there probably is, but it's such a constantly updating, constantly fluid information. And when you have boots on the ground in that community versus us, when we're depending on certain sources to give us that accurate information, we have to lean on certain people to make sure we're sharing the best info. And, I told that person, you're right. You do have that information there. And I think that information is factual. It's just a matter of, playing catch up and being fair to everyone and being mindful. And it's very complicated. So I know that can be frustrating for some, being like, well, that's not, 100%. But, we want to be just really thoughtful and making sure we have the best details shared with people. So that's my perspective on that. And taking it in, it's really tough. People experiencing that loss, it's really, it's horrible to hear of that situation in Minnesota. My heart goes out to those people and the communities affected by it for sure. But that's my perspective as a journalist. And I hope you understand a little bit, at least, of what we do when we're trying to put information together for the news.